Personal Legacy and Vision with Paul Lisnek. I have a great guest today for you guys here on Someone Gets Me, and you are going to love him. And there's so much to talk about. I'm not sure we're going to fit it in a show. So get some tea, sit back, and relax, and get ready to be inspired to follow your vision and create your own personal legacy with a man who is in his life, creating his legacy, following his vision in multiple venues. Paul, welcome to the show.
Thanks. I didn't get my tea, but I'll be okay.
Okay. Well, we want the listeners to have tea because we want them to settle in and really take in the wisdom that you have to share with us about vision and legacy and how it all goes together.
Fair enough.
So I know that you're an attorney, and I have lots of friends who are attorneys who are also creatives. And so I'm like, oh, there's a great synergy. I think there's beauty in that. And so what inspired you to go to law school?
So that's an interesting question, because I'm going to start off by saying that law turned out to be not where I wanted to be. And so my life now, of course, is television and radio and everything else. And yet my education in the law, I think in many ways is responsible for all of that. So it's going to be a bit of a long answer to your question, but I have to take it back to when I went to University of Illinois in Champaign-Urbana, and I was a sophomore in my liberal arts general year. Liberal arts general meaning I have no career, no future. And at the end of that year, you have to declare a major. So I went to see my counselor, and she said, "Okay, Paul, what's your major going to be?" And I said, "Accounting." And she just looked at me and went, "What?" And I went, "Well, my fraternity brothers are in business and they're going to accounting and whatever, and I got to get a job. So I'll go to business school. I'll be an accountant." And she said, "I don't respect you," which, Diane, you don't really want to hear from a guidance counselor.
Right.
But I said, what do you mean you don't respect me? And she said, "Do you want to be 60 years old someday sitting behind a desk doing somebody's taxes?" And I'll never forget, I said to her, "I'd rather be dead." Now, I'm glad I didn't go that way because I'm now over 60. So, Lord knows where that would have taken us. And I said, "No." And she said, "Well, what do you want to do?" And I said, "Well, I love communication, but what am I going to do? Be a communicator?" And she said, "Here's the thing, Paul, I don't know what you're going to do. It doesn't matter. You get one shot in this life to go for your passion, pursue your passion and go for it." She said, "You're in your 20s. She said, "Go be a communications major. And if when you come out, there's no career for you, then hey, go get an accounting degree. You'll be young. You'll have plenty of time to do it. But if you don't pursue your passion, you will look back on your life one day and saying, wow, I never went for what really mattered." So I went, by the way, when I left her, I said, "Well, I'm going to the business school." And she gave me my file. Back then, remember, we had paper. And
yes.
As I'm walking over to the business school, I had to pass the communications building. And Diane, like it was yesterday, I stood there. I stared at that building for the longest time. I can still see myself doing that. And I said, "I've got to do this." And just walked in, went up to room 244 of the office and declared my major to be communication. And I added in political science because I thought as long as I'm unemployable, I might as well two unemployable degrees. So that's what I did. But I loved it so much. I finished my both bachelors in 3 years. I did my master's in my 4th year. And at U of I, you can teach, which I had always wanted to be a teacher. So you can teach in your graduate school year. So here I am being essentially senior year, but I'm teaching, I'm getting my master's. I went on for my doctorate, and I thought, well, law's fun too. Let's do that. So I got a law degree. And the truth is, when I left, I never wanted to leave. I could have just stayed there the rest of my career. And I basically had people saying, "Look, you got to go to the real world." So I moved back to Chicago, 1983. And that's when I said, all right, I'm going to practice law for a while, not because I thought I would stay there for my career, but I knew it would be important to my credibility. And so I practiced for a few years. And I'm going beyond your question now, but the thing is that decision led to all of this, because after practicing for a few years, I got a phone call from a friend who was retiring as one of the deans at Loyola Law School in Chicago. She was one of the deans at Illinois when I was there. She said, "I know you're not a fan of practicing law. I'm retiring. You want to go for my job?" And so I said, "Yeah." So I did, got it. I became one of the youngest deans in the country at age 26. Did that for a while, but I'm still sitting there with, all right, I've got this law degree and this communications degree. How do they go together? I don't want to practice law anymore. What do I do? And I come across this career called jury consulting, trial consulting. Now, if your viewers watch the show called Bull, which I've never seen, but essentially it's all about a jury consultant. If they're reading my fiction books that I've written in the last couple of years, one called Assumed Guilt and Assumed Treason, which just won an award for best mystery. I admit that's a plug, but the hero of those books is a jury consultant. So this story I'll make very short because I went into jury consultant, even while I was still a dean, affiliated with an office, because back then there weren't a lot of us. But because there weren't a lot of us, guess what? You got the phone calls for the big cases. So we got the phone call for the O.J. Simpson case, and we worked in O.J. But I was been doing some local television. NBC called at the beginning of the trial and said, we know you do local television. You've been recommended to us. Are you willing to be in the courtroom, but not be part of the dream team? Because we did represent OJ, but to do coverage for us on NBC. Now, limousines, Katie Couric, let's do it. So, and that's what I did. So for the next period of 6-8 months, it was limos in the morning, Today Show, nightly news, just the life of television. And of course, I got bit by the bug. But we did other cases, Casey Anthony, Phil Spector, you remember the music?
Yes.
The producer, we had his case, Whitewater, lots of famous cases. But anyway, as time went on, so that was my world. But then the TV thing began. I wrote a book about my career in jury work called The Hidden Jury. That put me on a little bit of a book tour. Part of the book tour included WGN in Chicago, just to be on in the morning. And the morning anchors, it's the number one show in Chicagoland. It is up from 4 a.m. to 10 a.m. the whole time it's on. The morning anchor said, Paul, I know you do some local TV. I've seen you cover politics. Why don't you do that for us? We don't have anybody. I'm like, sure. So since 2008, I've been the political analyst at WGN TV, doing my own television show for most of those years. Now it's called WGN TV Political Report, part of the Sunday Morning Fray. So you see, Diane, the point is for people who in their early, and I know a lot of your viewers are, maybe in our age range now or somewhere within this range, but, and that's okay. The advice works. The bottom line is for folks who are in their 20s who might be watching us, pursue your passion, because you get one shot at this. But for those viewers who are in their 40s or 50s who are watching us, my view is don't look back on a life to say, hey, this isn't what I want to do. It's never too late to then do something else and pursue your dream. Look at Burt Mustin. Remember the character actor? He didn't even start television until his 60s. That's my story. There you go. See, I told you a long answer to your question.
Oh, I love your long answer. And I have many attorney friends who would have a very similar story. They went to law school, or like my roommate in college, who's my best friend, actually went to law school. She was taking political science and communication journalism classes when we were an undergraduate, and went to law school because that's just what the family expected. And she liked law and it was fun. And now she's doing all kinds of things other than that. And so I know so many people where they went after their passion, they got into it, and then other doors opened because they kept saying yes. And now they're doing all these other creative venues. So the trajectory that you shared aligns with what I see and hear a lot from gifted people, from the visionary creative people. Like the answer is not just one thing. It's that one thing that leads to another, that leads to this yes, that leads to that yes. And it all comes together and comes full circle by following your vision and your passion and seeking to keep saying yes to that inner calling. Because how would your life been if you didn't turn into that communications building that day?
I'd be an accountant doing your taxes. And to be honest with you, I wouldn't be happy. I wouldn't be in this home. I wouldn't be doing any of the things that's happened in my life.
Right.
And I'll say one other thing that, I have no journalism background, yet I'm basically in journalism full time now. It was the law degree. It was that thing of interest, well, certainly communication, but the law as well, and political science, all of it, that gave me the skills I needed to be an effective journalist, essentially, because it taught me how to ask questions and taught me how to follow up and taught me how to go in depth and taught me how to hear several sides of any issue. I mean, so really that was the magic direction to go. I didn't know it at the time, couldn't tell. I mean, by the way, at the time I was in school, we didn't have a million TV channels that we have now. So that I got to work for NBC and now WGN, which is a major channel, of course, obviously in the Chicago area. And even nationally, there's a WGN, or there was WGN America. New owners have gotten rid of that. But the bottom line is that, today, of course, anybody that wants to do media can go create a YouTube channel, can go onto a local cable station. I mean, there's so many ways to do it. So it never even occurred to me in my young days that it would be the direction I could go.
Right. And it's so exciting that you did and that you said yes, and the doors opened and you walked through them. When people offered you the opportunity and it came to you, you said yes. And I tell people all the time, saying yes is so vital because you can always change your mind. If you said yes to something and it didn't feel right to you, you could have said, no, thank you later. But without saying yes, you don't know, you never know where it's going to take you.
one of the other pieces of my puzzle is that back in 1989, I created a high school leadership program with a couple of business partners down in Florida. It was really their idea, but because of my TV work, they were familiar with me, and they found me and said, "You want to do this with us?" So it still exists today. It's a multi-million-dollar business. I'm not involved anymore, but we started. It was basically 18 days of law for high school kids that wanted to practice law, and so it was a high school program. And it was called the National Law Camp when it first started, and people that want to go check it out, Google National Law Camp. We were on the front page of every major newspaper, Today Show, CBS Morning, everybody covered it. It had never been heard of that there could be a summer camp for kids who wanted to learn law. And I can remember doing an educational panel on radio once where there were these other people who ran sports camps, because that's what kids did, right? Sports camps. Right. And they were all attacking me. How dare you make somebody learn something over the summer? Summer's for fun. And there was this educational expert on the panel. And when it got to him, he said, "I'll be honest with you. The only program I've heard so far that's of any value is the law program that Lisnek's doing." And of course, since then to on this day, the National Student Leadership Conference, it teaches law and business and medicine and engineering and anything else you can think of, because, not every kid wants to play baseball all summer. Some kids want to explore their future. So almost every program that I lecture at, because I still go back and lecture, the kids will say, how'd your career start, whatever. And I tell the story in a different way that I just told you. But I always say, here's the thing, my lightning strike for me, NBC's probably not going to call you, and tell you to do something. So, but it's not about that. It's about putting the energy out there, being in the space, as you said, Diane, being in the space you want to be in, and doors do open for you. Right.
They will open when you say yes to the possibilities and keep walking forward. It's that momentum, like you were walking, you turned in, you said yes, you said yes, you said yes. And that I think is like the magic sauce for all of us. Like when I look at my trajectory, I started in mental health, and then I worked with addiction, and now I have 3 podcasts, and I do these things, and I work with musicians, and I work with athletes, and I travel tours and things that I never knew I was going to do way back then at the University of Florida. And if I didn't say yes to all those opportunities, I wouldn't have had all these great things happen in my career as well. And I think that's like that thing. And I hear this consistently with those of us who are living our vision and living our legacy, that we say yes consistently. And I bet you we say yes more consistently than the average bear.
I think as people that put blocks up to that, they're afraid. And I get it. I totally get that somebody's afraid to take a step. They might have family obligations. There may be reason to say, well, sure, Paul, you were 22. So of course you could take those chances. You didn't have anything to worry about. The truth is I'd take them today, because it's just because when you do what there's that book, When You Do What You Love, The Money Will Follow. It's not a great book, but it's a great title. And I really believe that you have to just pursue what you're after. By the way, our first program was you mentioned Florida. So it was in Boca Raton at Barry University. That was the very first program, if you're familiar with that.
I know it I know that. I lived on the opposite side of the state, but I know Barry University in Boca Raton very well. Yeah. That's really cool. And so I want to talk some more about some other passions of yours that I think really show that how you build a legacy and you build your vision is multifaceted and multidimensional. That yes, you can go see Paul if you want to on WGN. It's all over the place. If you can watch all the analyst stuff, and that's one kind of thinking. And then there's the kind of fun thinking that has to do with creativity. And I would like you to share a little bit about your memorabilia, the museum that has your show in it, and how you became interested in Hollywood and actors and memorabilia and the richness of that culture, because there's so much richness there. And how did that start for you? And then a little bit about how that weaves into the creativity in your own personal world.
Loaded question, of course, lots to talk about there. But here's the thing. You are correct in noting there are 2 parts of my world. There's the political part, which is the WGN part, and there's the entertainment or more creative part, which is everything else. I also am an anchor for Comcast, which has its own network and that kind of thing. So for that, just for your viewers to understand, I host a show called Broadway in Chicago Backstage. which is a lot, kind of like an Inside the Actors Studio show. We do it in front of a live studio audience, hundreds of people. I sit with the cast and creative. So everything from Kinky Boots to Hamilton to Dear Evan Hansen and whatever the big shows are that are coming in town, we're gonna do a half-hour TV show, in-depth interview about it. So there's sort of two fan bases, if you will. There's the people that know me from the political world who send me hate email all the time, even though I'm neutral on the air. They don't care. And then there's the entertainment people who, really appreciate that. So the tie to the memorabilia and that kind of thing is twofold. I mean, I'm in my library right now. And so what's behind me, the pictures on the wall are mainly all political. So I've always been fascinated about having something, owning something from history, which can then be yours. And so part of what's behind me, there's a lock of Lincoln's hair that was cut from his deathbed, Washington's hair, Kennedy's hair. I don't have a thing about hair. It's just that the notion of I could actually have some strands of Abraham Lincoln's hair. It's unbelievable. And yes, It comes with provenance. We don't have to get into how I know it's authentic, but it's all authenticated. But not only that, document signed by FDR, on and on. And then there's a little thing behind me, which has Lucille Ball's actual sunglasses. I do a podcast where I do politics and entertainment. And I had Lucy's daughter on recently named Lucy Arnaz. And I said, Lucy, I got to tell you, I'm a crazed fan because I have the napkin at your mother's second wedding. I've got actually right next to me. I'm just going to pick this up. This was Lucy's makeup case, her makeup that she used, that she kept in her driver's car all the time. So it's just fascinating. On the table, there's makeup from Wicked, Elphaba, the green makeup that they go. So the thing is, anytime I find something that I'm going, that's just cool. If I can afford it, whatever, then I do it. Next to me, I have a Bible signed by Martin Luther King Jr. So it's history, it's entertainment. Yeah, I have the phone from the living room of I Love Lucy. I've got the phone from the living room of Dick Van Dyke, a phone from Andy Griffith. I'm a 60s kid. I kind of grew up in the 60s and 70s. And so I just, again, the notion of it, I've met so many of those people, sometimes just from going to collector shows and would meet some of them there. But the thing is, but sometimes not, sometimes because of the TV work I do and because I can interview these people on podcasts, it's gotten me to be I was friendly with Jim Nabors for many years before he passed away. We'd go out to dinner here in Hawaii. He would take me to dinner. Sometimes people are just really nice. And, maybe it's tougher to do. I don't think Tom Cruise is having me over for dinner, but when you're together with some of the folks like Kathy Garver, who I know is a friend of both of ours from Family Affair, they're open to making friendships and people today and appreciate the fact that people were fans of theirs years ago. And I guess because my interests are sincere and I work in the industry, member of the same union, it makes the possibility of those relationships. I wouldn't be doing this if I was an accountant. I got to keep going back to that, right? I wouldn't be talking to Lucy Arnaz about her mother if I might be doing her taxes, but I wouldn't be talking to her about all that great stuff.
Right, and Lucille Ball had a house in Sarasota. Yes. And when I was growing up, and so and I lived really close to there, and our yacht club was right there. I raced boats at that time, and so I remember seeing Lucy and all those kinds of things from way back then. And I think about it because I'm a 70s kid. I tell everybody I have mid-70s syndrome, that I love the mid-70s music, the 70s actors and actresses, and the things that matter. I was just up in Mount Airy and reminiscing on the
I love that
and reminiscing on the Andy Griffith show and all of that kind of thing. And I love the energy of it. And so I think it's really exciting that those things meld together for you in a way that is really fun. Like, because you can tell you just have a blast doing it. It's not I do. And
you triggered, I have to tell you this because you mentioned Mount Airy and I've been there as well. I bought the keys as a prop, the keys to the jail cell from Andy Griffith. And so I met Don Knotts and Betty Lynn one day, had lunch with Betty. And I said to Don, can you verify these? Were these the keys to the jail cell? And he goes, Paul, it's a prop. He goes, I can't. He says, but give me a piece of paper. So I gave him my business card and he wrote Barney's keys, Don Knotts. He goes, now they're authentic. Don't worry about it. And I thought, well, how great was that? And by the way, the reason for the Lucy interview wasn't just because I'm a Lucy fan. They recently started to, they were newly discovered for the rest of the world, but Lucy Arnaz knew about it. Did you know her mother did a radio show back in 1964? No. She interviewed Gene Kelly and Bing Crosby, and you name it, everybody in 64 to 66, Andy Griffith, by the way. So these interviews were just discovered and put out and made public. It's kind of a podcast now that people can get on Sirius XM. And when I saw the channel and started hearing these interviews just this morning, I listened to Red Skelton. you're getting this stuff from 1964 and Lucy's questions, what makes a good wife? And do you tell your wife what to do? And who runs your, with all this feminist or, women's liberation, whatever you want to call it. It was before all of that happened. So it's amazing how sexist and how whatever those interviews are, they're fascinating to listen to. And that's when I said, I've got to get to Lucy and I've got to do an interview. And again, because of what I do, guess what? I got to her and she agreed.
Sure she did. Oh, that's amazing. I didn't know that. I'm going to have to look up those interviews too. So now I'm a fan of your show already. And just meeting you, I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to listen to this show. This is so fun. Now, I'm also an author. We're both authors. I'm actually getting ready to send my 8th book to edit. And of course, when I saw that you were an author and I saw that, are all 14 of the books mystery books?
No,
or just the last 2.
Just the last 2. The first 12, again, a method behind the madness. The reason I wrote all my other books that started, there's a motivational book called Quality Mind, Quality Life. There's books on negotiation, and there's legal books on deposition skills. I always believed that because I was so young when I was doing a lot of things, I was doing seminars at age 25 and 26. Right. I felt I had to have a book for credibility purposes. So I wrote just a series of books, interviewing and counseling, all of these things that I lectured on to give myself the credibility. And people still use them. University of Arizona just ordered copies of my jury consulting book that they use in their class. So that's what triggered all of that. The fiction books were for fun. And just a way of playing out. They're set in Chicago. That's where I live. They're set in the neighborhood. So, they get a lot of good play from people here in the city because they literally, one reviewer said, it's like taking a bus down Michigan Avenue and having all these places identified. It's such the comfort of home. So, and as I said, Assumed Treason, which I think was not as good as the first book, but it won Best Mystery for Indie Awards this year. So who knows? Nice.
I'm gonna read those. I'm always looking for good books, and I love them when they're set in a real place like that. Like there's a lot in Florida that are set in my neighborhood in Sarasota and different places. And
sure.
And I've been to Chicago a few times. I have so many friends from Chicago. I feel like I should just be there. Like everywhere I look, there's all my friends are all from Chicago. So I was wondering if they were all mysteries. It makes more sense to me in a way that some of them were more technical and things like that. And I just, gosh, I don't know, maybe it was a couple of weeks ago. I was writing this book I'm working on. It's called Someone Gets Me, how intensely sensitive people make it in an insensitive world, which is also the title of my show as well, and other things. And I have community with the Someone Gets Me. And then I said, I want to write something different, like a novel or something, a short story or something like that. And so you just inspired me, I think I'm going to just follow that little train of thought to kind of see where it's going.
Well, and for me, the characters are based on, the names are all people in my life or at the TV station. The main character is named Matthew. That's my dog's name. So everything is very personal for me in terms of making that happen. But I was also lucky because I'm on WGN. When the books came out, I was able to go on and promote them and talk about them. So I would do some book signings. They promoted in the morning and people would come to the book signing because WGN is the #1 morning show. So, that's always real helpful too. So that's part of the reason that inspired me to do it. I knew there could be a reach and some assistance in the marketing because, as you well know, when authors write books, not a lot of people are out there to help us.
Right. There isn't. And a lot of people go, yeah, good for you. And then that's as far as it stops or whatever. And I write because it's a passion for me to write. And so what inspired you to write novels after having written the technical books? Like how did that kind of piece of inspiration come in?
So one more thing I have to say before I answer that question, which is my favorite thing, that was sarcastic, because what I really don't like is whenever I've written a new book, I'm sure you experience, everybody that knows you wants the free copy. Where's my free copy? Where's my free copy? So let me put this out publicly and just say this. When friends of mine write books, you write a book, people I know write a book, I'm the first person to go onto Amazon and buy it and bring it to them and say, please sign this for me. But I never, because free copy should be going to the PR people and the radio. When I interview somebody, I just interviewed Karen Tumulty on her book on Nancy Reagan. So the publisher sends me a copy so I can read it. That's where the free books go. But when your friends and family ask you for them, I get it. But at the same time, hopefully, maybe if they're listening to us, watching us, they'll sit back and go, hey, you're right. This is my family member, my friend. I'm going to support them. So that was a public service announcement.
And I totally agree with you on that, Paul. By the way, it's like when my friends write books or if somebody writes a book, I buy the book and ask them to sign it. I would never ask them for a free book.
Yeah,
it doesn't go through my mind. I want to support them and I want to buy the book, and then I go back and I do a review of the book.
Right. Now, look, there's certain people in your life. I've lost my parents recently, but certainly my parents got free copies of all my books, right? My brother gets a free copy.
Right. That's different, right?
I'm not, but you know what? My brother also bought one. I mean, that's the thing. If people who love you in your life want to take care of you, even if they get a free copy, you say, I'm buying one. I'm going to give it to somebody else because I want to help you. The inspiration, part of it was just the challenge. It took me 10 years to write Assume Guilt, the first book, because I threw away 3 different versions of it until I work with a woman. Her name is Virginia McCullough, and I'll talk about her, promote her. She lives in Wisconsin, but I've known her for 25 years. But with all my books, for me, she's an editor. But for some people, she's a ghostwriter. For some people, she's recorded whatever you need. She herself is well published. But she helped me so much because she helped me find my voice. My inclination maybe as a lawyer was I was writing in the third person. And after a while, she's like, no, you need to speak from the first person voice. So it was that kind of help, which is why it took me so long, because I kept redoing it. She'd read it and give me advice. And but part of it was, I think, this is really the truth. I always had the first line of my book in my head, and I had to write the line. I had to write the book to go with it, because I always envisioned a book that started off with the sentence, we, the members of the jury, find the defendant guilty. And of course, that person would not be guilty. But I wanted it to start with, we find the defendant guilty. I didn't know what the plot was. I didn't know anything. I just know I was starting it there, and whoever it was wasn't guilty. And it became, that first book became a tale of murder and mystery involving a governor. It's all set in Illinois. It's fiction, but it's about corrupt politicians, which people in Illinois go, are you sure that's fiction? And I did give a copy to the governor because, I'm not stupid. And so I gave it to him, our current governor. And I said, Governor, this is a copy of my new book. I said, it's about an Illinois governor who may or may not have committed murder. However, I want to tell you that I finished this book before you took office. And, and he just laughed and he says, oh, it was about my predecessor. So, but I was glad I did that and took a picture of him holding the book. That's always critical when you have people of note, famous, otherwise. I have everybody like Rahm Emanuel, whoever it is, I have them holding my book and taking a picture with them. And what happened was when I would post those, people started sending me pictures. The people that bought the book just would send me pictures. So I would post people, they didn't have to be famous, just somebody, and I would always turn into something cute on Instagram. People can follow me on Instagram. And, and I'll just say, be like this lawyer over here. Be smart, get yourself a copy of the book. I would always turn. And so people would do, one person held it upside down. They start doing goofy things with it. And that got to be fun.
Yeah, that's really, really fun. Yeah. That's great. So what do you do for fun?
That should be an easy question. Theater. Because everything is work for me, but because I don't use the word work. When I go to the studio to do, WGN here, I never say I'm going to work ever, because work is a negative thing for me. I think people that work aren't happy. So I go to the studio in the morning, or I go to the studio in the afternoon. And so because my theater is passion for me, I'm not an athlete. I'm not going to lie. I'm not a big athlete or anything, but I can't get enough theater. So because my podcast, like, for example, a new episode launched today. It's about the cast of Matilda, the musical.
Oh, yes.
I'm not a big fan of, but that's launching. And then a world premiere of 13 Days based on the Bobby Kennedy book. And so it's 2 theater companies. And of course, I'll be attending those openings. So, even technically, I suppose one could argue that's work, because I'm going to go to the openings for things I'm doing interviews about. But I'm sort of well known in theater community, and I should say my other passion is animals, dogs and cats. And so if you visit the Anti-Cruelty Society here, you will see the adoption room named for me, with pictures and plaques on the wall of me, my kids, the dogs. I named the outside memorial tribute wall as well, and over at a place called Paws, which has Dogtown and Cattown. It's kind of like for the rich suburbans, because every dog gets its own room, and it's great. It's great. But I've named a couple of rooms there, after my pets and stuff. So I would say, and maybe this is something we could talk about just before when we're done, but I believe in giving back. That's really important to me. And so, my kids may not be wealthy in the future, but I'm making sure that that my time on the earth is spent both while I'm alive, while I can appreciate donating things and giving things and naming things. I named seats in theaters, whatever it is. The bar at one of the place called the Black Ensemble Theater here, because I really want to encourage that kind of, their mission is to eliminate racism in our society. So it's all about giving back. And in my will, when I'm gone, there's going to be a lot of happy university people, dog people, theater people, because that's really where everything is going to go.
I think giving back is the key essential thing of somebody leaving their legacy, is to give back as we're going along down the road. And you just described that. In fact, I have goosebumps. Like, that is, to me, what leaving a personal legacy is like being aware and being conscious and giving back with intention and motive to the things that really sing to your heart, like the animals and the theater and creatives and whatever it is. I have a lot of love for academia and things like that, and universities, and that's where I give back to, like, freely. It doesn't. I don't use the word work either. I'm just always having fun. Like, whatever it is, I'm having fun.
And by the way, everything you say triggers things for me. So two quick things I have to mention. At the Anti-Cruelty Society, and again, part of being a public figure is that a state representative was there looking at cats, not sure she was going to get one, was put in an interview room where my picture's on the wall. And she then put something on social media saying, "Paul, when I saw your picture, I knew that was a sign I needed to adopt this cat." And so, so doing good work that way. And finally, in academia, because you're right, I didn't emphasize that. I should say that building, which housed the communication department, which was my home, it's called Lincoln Hall. And some years back, they completely renovated Lincoln Hall. And so I decided to donate money to name 2 conference rooms, faculty conference rooms. And also, when I was teaching there, the TAs used to work in what was called Room 8. It was a below ground place where I'm sure you're going to die from asbestos inhalation at that time. But part of the revamp was there is no more Room 8. It is now it's a cafe, a coffee. It's not underground anymore. It's like this more open area, even though you take steps down. And It's now the Paul Lisnek Cafe. And I wanted to name that because that room was so important to me. What's really the thing? This is not an ego. Well, part of it might be an ego thing, but because I don't think I'm going to find joy saying, when I'm dead, man, there's going to be that conference room. I want to take my kids to that conference room. I want to go have coffee in that thing and just know I'm making a difference. And because I am a public figure, trying to use what I've done to encourage others to make a difference. That's what I'm about. That's what I'm trying to do. So for those who are watching saying, "Oh, what an ego, he wants to see his name on things." Okay. But if in the process, people are also donating and giving and doing this themselves, because I always tell people, you don't have to wait till you're dead to do things. You can do things while you're alive, smaller increments, spread it out over time. That's how I do stuff, and just make a difference, even if it takes you years. So that's important.
Exactly. And I think that's totally true. And you're building memories when you take your family to the memory of the place, and then you name it to honor it. And then you take family members, you take friends there, or you go there yourself, and you get to have the feeling of the story. And our lives are a big story. And so I always ask people, when are you going to start signing your masterpiece? And when are you going to honor the story? And that's the way you honor your story. And I think it's beautiful.
Thanks. Yeah, I would say every year, in fact, I've whatever. I give a lot of money to U of I and stuff, and my financial people sort of said, these large gifts you do, maybe start to put a cap on it, because you're getting older, and life is going to change, but we know it's important to you. But just start to think about it. So now as I'm getting older, I'm happy I did a lot of these grander things. One of the things I also did at U of I when I was a graduate student, one of the graduate professors said to me, Lisnek, you're never going to give back to the school. All you're going to do is go be a rich lawyer one day and go practice law. And I looked at him and said, I'm going to make you this promise. If I am ever successful in life, I will name a chair in this department for the law and communication, which was my field of study and an area I actually studied. There wasn't a law and communication field before I got there. So that field, and he kind of laughed. And guess what? A few years later, I did it through an insurance policy. So it's not like I had all that money to endow a chair, but I got an insurance policy, which will endow that chair when I'm gone. And my greatest pleasure was to go into his office and go, I set up the chair, buddy. And he just sort of, I was kidding. And I went, I wasn't. And That was a great moment.
Yeah, that's great. That's wonderful. So on kind of a little bit of a different note, that has to do with creativity a little. What's the most memorable food you've ever eaten? So I have to go with just immediate thinking. And so there are these egg rolls
from a place called the Pekin House. I know I'm supposed to say something grander than that, but I'm a really simple person. I'm a spaghetti, pizza, hamburgers, chicken. So that I even said egg rolls was pretty daring for me. But there was a place in Chicago called the Pekin House. It was there for 70 years on a street called Devon and near Western. And my parents, it's where we went every Sunday, right? I'm Jewish. Jewish people go for Chinese food on Sundays. That's kind of part of the religion. And so we would go to the Pekin House on Sundays, and I would only eat the crust. The crust was really good. And as the years went on, I got to eat the whole egg roll. And there's a secret ingredient in their egg rolls, which is peanut butter. So I'll put that out there for any Chinese chefs who are out there who wonder what makes an egg roll taste good. It's peanut butter, if you're not allergic to it. And so anyway, so I would have these my whole life, and the Pekin House went out of business. And it was just a horrendous, I mean, I can't tell you how terrible that was. Certainly for the town. I grew up in Skokie, Illinois, where the town I grew up was like, we all went to the Pekin House for Chinese food, and they're gone. But time goes on, and I find a member of the family whose family owns another restaurant in DeKalb, Illinois, about an hour and a half away. And so I track him down. And I said, is this the family that made the Pekin House egg rolls? They're world famous. And he goes, yeah, that's my family. He says, we make them here. I went, you're kidding. So I now order. So even though the restaurant is long gone, and now his new restaurant, due to COVID, unfortunately, didn't make it either. But I would buy 12 dozen of them, and he would drive them in because he'd bring them to WGN. He was a huge WGN fan. I said, you bring them to me, and I'll let you meet Tom Skilling, famous weatherman, and we'll tour you around the studio. He was more than happy. And he'd bring a tray of cooked ones just to pass around. And anybody who's there who grew up where I did, they went, those are Pekin House egg rolls. Give me one of those. So that's one of my favorite foods. And the fact that in my freezer right now, man, I've got about 10 dozen left. And I'm still in touch with him because he said he'll find a way through some cousin's restaurant to make this happen in the future. So that's my favorite food.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Has there ever been any time in all of your career where you were walking around and people didn't understand you, and maybe you felt disconnected from the people around you, or were you able to kind of stay connected?
Well, there's two ways that rears its head. When I was a high school student, I was very active in student government, which is why the law and the that sort of was what people thought I would do, run for government or something. I was very active in student government. And I mean, so much so that it was like, I mean, I was president of the school for 2 years. Nobody would run against me. It's just one of those things where it's like too much power for a kid. And it was kind of a joke that I was running the school. But I went through a real serious depression, even in those younger days. And I can remember, I would do some theater too. I mean, I'd have just a lot of luck. I would welcome the teachers at the beginning of the school year as president of the school. And the director came up and said, you don't do theater. I want you to try out for the show. And all of a sudden I'm getting leads in the shows that he's doing, like Play It Again, Sam. So I went through this sort of things are too good. Why is all this happening? And I was kind of freaking out. So some teachers kind of, saw that. And even though they weren't my teachers, but they were people who knew me, and they worked with me to just kind of find some inner strength and realize that that was going on was good stuff. And it didn't really have to be bad. The more current kind of challenging thing is that because I do television, that creates a persona. And it's partially me, but it's not me. And my job is I'm a political analyst, not a commentator. So when I'm on TV, I present both sides. Now, that was easy to do in the Obama years. But in the Trump years, and I'm not talking about that it was tough for me to do what I had to do, but there was so much dissension in this country, certainly in everywhere you go, and Chicago is no different, that no matter what I did, in every morning show, every show I'm on, whatever I would say, if it sounded anti-Trump, I would say, and the Trump supporters would say this. That's what I have to do. Everything is balanced. Producers get it. Everybody I work with say, no, you're great at that. You do what you got to do. But viewers, especially, really, I'm being honest, it's the Trump supporters. They don't hear the other side and aren't willing to hear the other side. And I know I'm being political when I say that, but it's my experience that I'm sharing with you. And I don't care that they hear the other side. What do I don't know. They can do what they want. I respect what they want to think. But it's the hate emails and the hate. And this happened to me just yesterday. I mean, this is new. Of some guy who I was on in the morning and he took a screenshot. And behind me, I have a series of Ron Lee, Jerry Lewis statues, which were made back in the 90s, 80s. But I also have one, which is Mount Rushmore, and it's got Bozo on there. And Bozo that's the WGN icon. Bozo Circus was WGN in Chicago. Right. So he took a screenshot and went onto my Facebook page and he said, who's Bozo, Biden or Trump? And I always take the hard. I says, no, actually he said, who's the clown? And I said, no, that's actually Bozo. I work with WGN, right? So that's just a tribute to Bozo. And he responded by saying, you're not going to get away with that. And he starts attacking. And I took the high road and said, look, it's really a piece of art. It's really Bozo the Clown. It's really about WGN. So my point is, there's a lot of people that, I think have mental issues and stress and they need help. And they're taking it out. Dude, I'm just a guy on TV who tries to present an analysis of politics. I'm not taking sides, but you can't convince them of that. And so that's a current challenge that, you just have to let it go. You walk down the street. Oh, I love you. I love you. I love your work. I love your work. And once in a while, asshole, what are you going to do?
Right. So you have to develop your thicker skin. And
I'm not good at that because I'm pretty sensitive. So I try and pretend that I do, but it's tough.
It is tough. It is tough. And I can see it in your face how tough it is. And I can only imagine that. I've had stuff happen like that in my life, but not to that extreme. And it hurts. And here you are trying to follow your vision and you're trying to do the very best you can. And you get attacked for it. And that's very painful, especially for sensitive people who are visionaries, who are trying to do something good in the world. It's just really hard.
To me, it's all about education. It goes back to always wanting to be a teacher. And I see what I do on television now as education. Now, the plus side to that is that this happened last week. I'm walking down the street and some guy sees me and says, can I take a picture with you? I said, sure. And, the friend I'm with, give me the camera, I'll take the picture, and kind of a thing. And it's like, so that's nice. That's like, thank you for watching. Thank you. That's a good experience. It's a nice experience. And I'm always friendly, as Kathy Garber, our mutual friend. I used to be friends with Jackie Mason, who passed away recently. And when we would go to dinner, people would come up and just, Miss Jackie Mason, and they grab him and all these things. And I said, Jackie, how do you deal with this? And he goes, well, he had a thick accent, right? He goes, well, I'm a celebrity. They love you. This is what I got to do. They're fans of mine. And I get that. I respect the fact that he didn't yell at anybody. He didn't say, get away from me, because he goes, without them, I'm nothing. And so I'm nice to everybody, even the guy who was being mean to me the last couple of days. I just took the high road the whole time, just, doing what I can do.
Right, exactly. And there's a lot of emotion around that. And when you're following your heart, though, and you have integrity that way, it makes it a little bit more easy. Like I can take the high road because I'm sitting here and doing my thing and in integrity. And, that's just the way it is. But I can feel you. I can feel that. Like, oh, man. Okay, so when you got a lot of stress going on in your life, and life is stressful in general anyway these days, what things do you do that help you ease the stress?
So when the COVID thing started, because I'm a hypochondriac. So when the COVID thing started, it was really bad for me. I developed every symptom you could possibly have in my head. And it was difficult. So I actually went, I put myself in therapy and working through some things for a very short amount of time. Even took I don't remember what it's a drug, but I don't want to say that. It was very minor, and mild kind of a thing. But it's something where my doctor just said, you need to do this for a little bit, just calm yourself down. Right. And I was very, I did it every few days. I'm a wimp about all that kind of stuff. So, but really it's about therapy and I guess watching TV, but I'm one of those people that wears my heart on my sleeve. So I want to have a magical answer for you and say, when I'm stressed, here's what you do to get rid of it. Just blow up a balloon. But that doesn't work for me. I readily admit that I wear it on my sleeve. I just have to work through it. And here's the thing. If my stress has to do with somebody else, like I'm worried that I offended somebody which happens, I've said something, I don't know how that came off. Then I will call that person, go to that person. I will do something and address it because I need to clear it up. And by the way, 9.5 times out of 10, I was wrong. I'm not offended. I wasn't whatever. It was nothing at all. But because it irks me, I need to clear it up. I can't just move on like it didn't happen or I didn't say it.
Right. That's a really good point, because I've done that before where it sounded funny to me and whatever. I called my friend and say, did what I say? I started trying to clear it up and I think they were looking at me like, what are you talking about? Like I even had to remind them of what happened. Like it was so not in their radar. But until I took care of it in me, it would have just kept nagging at me. It's true. That's the healthy way to handle it.
And by the way, if it is a problem, if somebody says, you know what, I really didn't appreciate that, then let's talk it through for a minute. Because I don't want that to be a block. I love you. I don't want that to be a block. So, that was a bad choice of words on my part, or I'm sorry, or whatever. Whatever the explanation is, but talk it through, because in the end, you're probably going to hug it out.
Right. And that's a lot healthier and makes a lot more sense in some other things. So where do you see our culture going? You've been in the TV and in the entertainment world for a long time, and you have a great appreciation for the 60s and 70s and in that time era, as I do. And I sit back sometimes and I just kind of wonder, like, where is all this going? And do you have any sense or thoughts or ideas that you feel like sharing about that?
I think that's a political question for me, the way I hear it.
Okay.
Because I mean, on the entertainment end, I could say, will there ever be another Andy Griffith show? And the answer is no. Somebody just the other day, I'm on Facebook on, different like groups of Andy Griffith or Lucy, that kind of stuff, because I love that. And somebody said, if they made Andy Griffith show today, would it be successful? And the answer is no.
No.
The reason it works today is because people who were around then have a great appreciation for those shows, that life, that humor. We can relate to it. Young people, kids, my kids are in their 20s, sort of, almost, and they don't have they have no interest in that. It's just not, so it's that nostalgia thing that works for me. It's not their thing. The same way, music, I think, works the same way, unless you're the Beatles, and then you're good with everybody, no matter when. But the political piece of that, I'll be honest, I think it's going to get worse before it gets better. This anti-democratic with a small d sense that is in our country right now, this notion of the government is no good. And I mean, it's astounding. If you would have told me back on January 7th of this year, that a few months from then, the people who stormed the Capitol, who I consider to be insurrectionists, I'm being a little political, but I said this on the air. So if it takes a position, it takes a position. To me, they were insurrectionists. The fact that has been turned around, that they were heroes, that they were fighting for freedom, that the FBI, the CIA, the government, those are the enemies. It is stunning that there is probably a third of the country who think that way, and there's no talking them out of it. So, until, in my view, the Trump wing of the party finds a more moderate voice to come back and say, you know what, there are such things as Republicans, and we can run the country, and we can get along with the Democrats, and we can move this country forward. And the way things, the way things used to be. I think as long as Donald Trump is going to run again, and he's around, and his kids and whatever, I just think it's going to get worse. Do I think we're here 10 years from now? I don't know. 20 years from now, we probably worked through this. There'll be a lot of books written about. You'll write them. I'll write them. A lot of books about these days. How did this ever happen? But it's stunning to me that we are where we are, and that it's going to continue, I think, for some time. Trump gave people a voice. So people, I'm sure you have Trump supporters who are watching this and they're hearing me be negative, anti-Trump. I'm not being anti-Trump. I'm just speaking factually that Trump ignited something in people. He stirred something in people that was already there. He was a spark for something that was there, but it emboldened them to say, yes, we're going to do this. And so I guess the good part of that is people are pursuing the way they want things to be. But, there's a way you do it in a fair and free democracy. And it's just not happening right now. And hopefully that'll work itself out.
Right. Yeah. And I agree. I think that's what happened. And that he gave a voice to the thing that was brewing underneath it all already. Yeah. And that's just how it came out. And so it's time for people to do their inner work and their healing, and to really step back and say, is what I'm seeing and what I think real? Yeah. Or is it a story I've made up, or what is going on with that? And so I've heard the comment said many times that musicians and artists are the ones that kind of document the culture and kind of show us the way, in the poets and those kinds of things. And so when you look at the current state of like Broadway and what's going on in the different plays that are being written, in the music that's out there, is there any of the current day music that kind of sings to your heart?
Well, there I'm old fashioned because, when I'm playing my Alexa, I wasn't going to say the name because she can hear me. But when I'm playing that, I'm playing jazz, I'm playing standards, I'm playing Streisand. I'm a huge Streisand fan. I've gotten friendly with Barbara's sister, by the way, Roz Kind, who sounds just like her and actually sings very much like her. And she's done my podcast and have gotten to know her some. But anyway, so it's that sort of traditional stuff. And I'm asked a lot by young people, well, what's your favorite shows? What kind of theater? And for me, there's the Fiddler on the Roof, which I grew up grew up with. That's probably, if I have to pick a musical that's favorite of all time, that's it. Whenever I'm at a party, I can sing whatever. So I'll do If I Were a Rich Man as my kind of standard at parties and things. West Side Story. And even, by the way, West Side Story, I got to interview George Chakiris, who won an Oscar for playing, for playing Bernardo. And we become good friends. He does jewelry, by the way. He's made a couple of pieces of jewelry for me. It's just so fun maintaining the relationships. But anyway, these days, I mean, shows like Hamilton, like Wicked, like Dear Evan Hansen, I just think they're amazing.
Yes.
And so, and because I love them, to be able to say, hey, I'm going to get to sit with Stephen Schwartz. I'm going to sit with Harvey Fierstein. I'm going to sit with the folks who did this, created this, Jerry Mitchell, who's directed and choreographed all of them. And be able to do this is just astounding. Chicago, we have, there's a new show coming. It's pre-Broadway. It's called Paradise Square. It'll be in New York next year. It's going to Broadway, but it's starting here, as many shows do. And so being able to sit with the cast and creative of that show before it even gets to Broadway, it's just really exciting for me. So that's what I enjoy. That's what I enjoy listening to. And that's, I don't get modern music. I'm not a rap fan. I'm not or some of the stuff where every other word is a swear word. I'm not a prude about it. I don't care, but it's just not my thing.
Right. Yeah. Perfect. Yes. I was somewhere the other day and somebody asked what kind of music that I prefer to listen to. I said jazz. And then she kind of looked at me funny. I said, well, classical, big band, like that. Like my mother was a classical pianist. And so I was raised on that, and I love jazz and I love most music, but I'm kind of like you are. It's like, if I don't care for it, I don't judge it as wrong. I just listen to all these things over here.
Exactly. And so sometimes I have a tambourine used and signed by the Smothers Brothers, because I love the Smothers Brothers humor. Right now, Kay Ballard, if you remember Kay Ballard, the actress, she was a good friend of mine, and I'm talking to her state, so to speak, about she used to play the flute and stuff, about getting the flute. I should mention, you mentioned the museum early on, and I did all of this, like everything's in my house. The Museum of Broadcast Communications has what is the Paul Lisnek Gallery. Now, it was lovely that they did that, but that, of course, came because I financially helped the museum stay alive. So that's where it came from that. So that's where the gallery came from. So part of it is just a tribute to my career and things that I've done, but also I put on loan there a variety of things from my collection. So I have Bob Hope's jacket from Vietnam, which I interviewed his daughter Linda, and what a thrill to tell her I had. Jerry Seinfeld's notes from his show. I mean, just all sorts of things. There's a long story, Kathy Garver from Family Affairs. She gave me this pendant. It's too long a story to tell, but she gave me a pendant that she wore during the show. And the way they taped that show back there, Brian Keith would do his scenes and then he would leave. And there were continuity issues all the way through the rest of the season. So anyway, she lost it. She wore it to a party and she lost it. And so they had to go find a replacement. It's different, but that's what she wore in the show. So she gave it to me as part of my memorabilia collection. And a few years after that, she called me and she said, guess what I just found? And she found the original pendant. So now I have both pendants. The original, whatever. And that, of course, on loan to the museum. So, it's about owning that and having loving the fact that I have this piece of history in my world, but also knowing that it goes on loan as well. There's a TV show called Collector's Call, and my collection was featured the very first show of the series. Season 1 featured some of my historical stuff. We focused on the historical.
Oh, I just love that. I'm going to put links to all of these things in the show notes so that you guys can go check out what Paul is really doing. And I'm also going to put links to all of his social media things so you can follow him and let him know you heard him here on the show. So I have one final question before we end. I could talk to you forever, but I'm very aware of your time and you've been so generous. And so thank you so much.
Pleasure.
I have one final question and I'm excited to hear your answer. We're going to put a billboard up that the whole world is going to see with your message on it. What do you want the world to hear from you?
I think it would say, give back and make a difference.
Beautiful.
I can make it longer, but it's too long for a billboard. So
yeah, a billboard. It's short and sweet. Give back and make a difference.
Give back, make
Paul Lisnek. Oh, that's perfect. Yeah. Well, Paul, thank you so much for being on the show with me today and just sharing so freely. And I'm inspired. And so I'm sure everybody who's watching and listening to us is inspired as well. So thank you so much.
It's my pleasure. By the way, if anybody gets the books, I always make this offer. I bought a thing of book plates because I know people like signed books. We can't do that these days. So if anybody does get it and they just send me a note on Facebook or whatever, I'll sign a book plate and mail it off to them.
Oh, perfect. I'm going to do that because I'm buying your books because I'm like, yes, I want to get them. And I'm excited to read them. I am a big James Patterson fan. I helped out with one of his book signings And his sister is a very close friend of mine. And so I went to help out with this book signing. And in the advertising, somebody said, or they put out, he would sign 4 books a person. But he got there and he said, I will sign every book and I will talk to every person. And he was the most kind, generous, giving person. He signed every single book. And there was a line around the building. It took like 7 or 8 hours because I was the person who stood by him and made sure that nobody was harassing him, made sure he had pens and water and all that. Like I was the one helping. And I listened to one generous, good, kind comment after the other for hours and hours and hours. And he did not stop until the last people went through and was totally, one person brought in 20 books and he signed every one of them.
That's great. I really respect, and no surprise to you, I have a signed book collection. No surprise to you, I have the latest book signed by Bill. It's a presidential signed book collection signed by Mr. Patterson and Bill Clinton, of course. Right. I wish I had known you at the time because you might have just brought it with you and had him do it, but oh well.
Right. It would be right. But it's one of those things that generosity and that caring along the way matters and not waiting until we're gone. So right. I love your billboard. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Diane. Appreciate it.
So remember, everybody, keep your face to the sun so the shadows fall behind you because you're a rock star and you're here on purpose with a purpose. So go out there, let your light shine, and leave a legacy now while you're alive. Until the next episode, be well.